afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Kingdom of Dreams podcast and Making of Stories. Today, my guest is Eric Kissack, who is the editor on Apple's new series, The Studio, starring Seth Rogen and a whole bunch of other cast, including Martin Scorsese, Ron Howard, Charlize Theron, and a bunch of other individuals. A very fabulous series that is currently playing on Apple TV Plus with 4 episodes in. And Eric shared some insights about being on the set and almost doing live editing, obviously before the actual post-production work. Here's my conversation with Eric Kissack on editing the Apple series, The Studio. I just finished watching the first 3 episodes of, well, I shouldn't say I just finished. I did see the first 2 earlier, and I finished watching the third one, and totally loved the series. Being in the industry, I mean, even if you're not, the pacing of the episodes, the writing, the characters is just so spot on. It's just
Oh,
100%
wonderful.
spot on. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you liked it.
Yeah, no, it's something that reminded me very much of that, but it's a totally different story. What was that? The one that came out a couple of years ago. It was about Godfather, how Godfather was
Oh
made.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, what was that called?
The Offer, The
The
Offer.
Offer.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And but this is a completely different, obviously it sets in a different time period, the insanity behind it and everything. So yeah, let's start from scratch. How did you come on board? Was it as simple as someone you had worked with previously, or any other process? I would love to get the ball rolling on that first.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a comedy editor for a pretty long time now, and actually first met Seth Rogen when he was doing some writing on a movie I edited for Sacha Baron Cohen called Bruno.
Yes.
So we met a long time ago, and then I'd sort of been doing a bunch of comedy editing for movies, and I'd been doing a little bit kind of like a comedy punch-up work, where I come on and sort of help out on a movie. And so Seth Rogen brought me on to do a comedy punch-up on Sausage Party, an animated film that he worked on. And that was the first time I actually worked for him, and it was a great relationship. And he brought me back to cut the pilot for Black Monday, and then he brought me back to work on Pam and Tommy, and Ninja Turtles. And so yeah, when this came up, he called me and he said, "Would you like to do this?" And I said, "Yes, of course."
Amazing. So what's interesting about this series is um, long takes, not to mention episode 2 being a complete oneer, right? As an editor, how, how do you sort of, obviously there's, a lot of retakes, especially in episode 1 and 3. There's each scene must have a lot of retakes because it's just, you know, uh, let's say 3 4 minute long scene. Like the very opening scene, the first episode, I think was 5.5 minutes long.
Hmm. Hmm.
But then episode 2 is like, from beginning to end, like a theater production. So
Yeah.
how is this, a little different, if at all, from anything else you've done where you're working with, for the lack of a better word, less material, if I want to call it?
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't be more different. So when Seth called me to work on this, he told me how he wanted to make it, and he said, "I'm pretty sure the only way this is going to work is if you're on set." And I was like, "Yeah, I think you're right." And so I was on set for all 60 days of the shoot, which is not something an editor usually does. Editors usually sort of feel strange and out of place on sets. Um, but it was a fascinating experience. I mean, I sort of started by kind of like having like a soul searching moment, and thinking like, well, what is it that an editor does, like especially a comedy editor, like what do they do, and like what are the parts that I couldn't do given the way that they were going to shoot it. And so I kind of like broke everything down into like 3 different categories. Like essentially, comedy is all about pacing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And normally when we're in an edit, we just crank every scene. We take out every extraneous word, we take out extraneous breaths. We speed things up. We cut to a reaction shot so we can get a character across the room faster, so not waiting for them to open the door, that kind of thing. It's all about pacing and rhythm. And I knew I wouldn't be able to do that with the way they were shooting. So that was like bucket one. Bucket two was improv. Like, not all comedy is improv, but I knew there were going to be a lot of funny people on set, and they'd be doing different things from take to take. So there could be like a really hilarious thing that Catherine Hahn does in take 12, and a really hilarious thing that Ike Barinholtz does in take 15, and choosing between those two things would be painful. So, would there be any way to kind of like combine those things? So that was sort of bucket two. And then bucket three was just transitions from scene to scene. I mean, a lot of times what an editor is doing is figuring out like, how do you keep the momentum going for a whole episode? Like, do you need a breath at one point? So, okay, let's put in a establishing shot. Let's put in a shot of the sun rising over the city in the morning. Let's like control the pacing using, like a mini montage or something like that. None of which we could do in our show. I mean, our internal rule was that we could only do a cut when there was a big time jump, so that meant no establishing shots. It meant no like cutting from one office to another. Like if we went from one office to another, we had to follow the characters as they went. Okay, so then I would sort of enter problem solving mode. Okay, how do I deal with pace and timing? Well, one thing I need to do is just sit by Seth and Evan, who are directing, Evan Goldberg, and just tell them like, hey, after take 4 or 5, like, hey, this is feeling good, but this part is feeling a little slow. Let's tighten it up. Let's maybe cut this line because it's like funny but not that funny. Stuff that I would have the freedom to do in the edit, but I had to do it on set, and it's very stressful to sort of say to Seth Rogen like, hey, I don't think this line is funny enough. Let's cut it. But eventually I did, and he would almost always agree. And, usually by like take like 12 or 13 or 14, we would have a version of the scene that was maybe like 80% as long as the original version, but that was flying. It had energy. Like there were no duds, that kind of thing. So that was really exciting. And then part of it also was like blocking. Like I would say, like, okay, this moment is losing a little bit of energy because, we're waiting for Ike to go to that door, so let's have like say the line as he's on the move, so he's at the door, at this point, that kind of thing. So it was sort of like crafting the pace of the scene live. I called it like live editing.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So that was
that makes awesome. That's awesome. Go on.
yeah. So that was sort of bucket one. Bucket two, improv. So it was a thorny problem because like we had these long takes, and again, Catherine Hahn would do something wild and crazy in take 16. So what I started doing is I started working with the camera operator. It was amazing. Mark, God, I forgot Mark's last name. But he's like a genius. And what was so genius about him was that he was incredibly consistent. Like you would tell him, okay, after this line, I need you to pan from this character to this character. Okay, and he would remember to do that every single time, and he would remember like 8 different moves. And the reason why we did that is because he was so consistent, because the actors were so consistent, they're blocking, we could move from take 12 to take 16 in that pan. And so I would sort of like design these moments with Mark, and I would say like, okay, there's a big improv moment here where Catherine Hahn is just saying something different every time. Let's put a little pan in before she does that so that I can use that as a cut point, because, we can sort of like digitally manipulate the moves to sort of create cuts. Every time you do that move at that exact time, and then I can swap takes at that moment, so a lot of those scenes, it's like a 3-minute scene, it's going to be 4 or 5 different takes, because I'm like, I take the best moment from this and the best moment from this and the best moment from this, and I stitch them together on the pans, usually. And sometimes we were like got a little fancy where we would have like a character cross frame, and we use that as our cross, that is our stitch point. Call them stitch points.
Those I noticed.
Yeah. And we got better at those as we went along. Like there's ones that happen in the last like 3 or 4 episodes that like you just can't tell. Like I'm even like blown away. I'm like, wait, we did something there, right? We just got better at like the digital trickery of it all. And then transitions, that was just me sort of like having to keep in mind like, okay, wow, the previous scene we ended close on Seth's face, we probably want to start this next one on a wide, so I'd say to the camera guys like, okay, we can start wide, or like, hey, this is a new day, like, can we start the camera on a shot where you can see the sun kind of coming up, like we can't do an establishing shot, but we can include that information in the pan. And I wasn't the only one who was thinking about these things, but that was sort of part of my job, just to worry about that. So yeah, those are sort of like the 3 things that I was like obsessed with while I was on set. and I think it all worked out decently.
Yeah, no, so it's interesting you talked about live editing, right? So not to take away anything from Mark, the cinematographer, or Evan, the director,
Mark, the camera operator,
the
Adam,
camera
cinematographer.
operator,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
camera operator, Adam, cinematographer, but it's just you're essentially serving not to me, not obviously officially,
Mhm.
uh, kind of like as a co-director, as a co-camera operator, like just to make sure everything sort of synergizes together. And I think that's a really cool thing that you Seth did to have you come on, because comedy is all about timing. Everything
Yeah.
about comedy is timing. And there were some things that in episode 1 and 2 that I picked up, and that this could be just me being biased. I've
Mhm.
grown up with Seinfeld, right? Like
Mhm.
even to, I felt there was a lot of timing and certain moments of the choice of words and the way they were delivered that had that little bit of a mash and slash Seinfeld kind of a feel to it.
Mhm.
Whether it was intentional or not doesn't matter, but it just connected to me at a very, very deep level because of those great quirky, fast, to the point moments, sarcastic, serious, etc., etc. So, and that also
Yeah.
speaks a lot of volume about the characters. The characters are
Mhm.
developed really, really well, even in that fast pace, which I thought was fantastic.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, so much of that is also, a testament to the actors. Like, there'd be like, every time we did a scene with our core group, Seth and Ike Barinholtz and Catherine Hahn and Chase Sweet Wonders, like it was like, you're watching virtuoso maestros of comic acting. They were just so on fire. And then every now and then you'd have someone come in, not like, just it's not a skill that everyone has, but there'd be like a new person in, and the rhythms would just be like a little bit off, and so it's like not everyone could do this kind of like zany madcap live theater performance, but the ones that could, luckily, we had most of them as a
Yeah,
part of our core cast.
100%. And personally, for me, one of the most amazing scenes was, I think it was the end of episode 1, when Seth Rogen's character and Catherine O'Hara's character are sitting on this kind of a balcony of her
Yeah,
house, and you see the LA downtown rainbow,
yeah,
and the crane comes in, and the timing of that was, it was not the fact that it was a crane, a long take, but the way his character was going on about being frustrated and everything, and as soon as the camera came close to them, the moment everything became calm. Like, they started
yeah.
talking about calm, and I thought that was brilliantly executed. Like, it's probably one of the most amazingly choreographed scene in the entire series. Beside, yes, there's wonders and all that, but that was something else for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's also the first time in the whole series, but we kind of like
Calm
have an
down.
emotional moment, and
Yeah.
it's also like the first time, like our score is like kinetic, crazy drums, Antonio Sanchez like blasting the drums like crazy. And then we just stop and we have this jazz piece that just sort of like has a piano, and it just feels so different, and it creates such a wonderful effect. The that was the first piece of music that I put into the whole show that was not like just pure drums, and like everyone who heard it was like, "Oh my god, it feels such a nice moment to just like take a breath for a second." Um,
Yeah.
that scene was funny because we shot that scene. We rehearsed it a lot, and we shot it like 15 or 16 times, and it was raining. It was like gross and cloudy and raining, and we shot the scene, and we basically, you couldn't really tell that it was raining. It was like drizzling. And we got it. And we felt like pretty good about it. And then we start like packing up to like move on to the next thing, and all of a sudden the clouds part and the sun comes out and there's a rainbow. I'm like, oh my god, go back, go back, go back. And they, like, everyone like jumped on the camera gear, and like Seth and Catherine ran out there. And so like that take was like the moment the clouds parted, and we shot the whole thing again.
Oh, awesome. I actually thought the rainbow was post. So
We
it
figured
was a real,
everyone would assume that, but no, it was really
yeah,
there.
that's really awesome. That is so cool. Those are the best times in production, like when you just randomly get stuff very quickly, and if it, in a very quick manner. So that's super awesome, man.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so moving on to the second part episode, I'm just kind of going in not any particular order, but
Do your thing.
the fact that it's called the Oner, it to me it looked like a Oner. Were there any cuts in it?
Yeah, yes, yes, there were.
Yeah, I thought
Um,
so.
yes.
I gotta watch it again now.
Yeah, yeah. So in we shot it in 10 different pieces. So
Mm,
it was designed to be 10 different pieces sort of stitched together. Um, and then because of like the kind of the improv and the nature of that and kind of combined takes, we ended up adding a few more cuts. We didn't have to, but it was just like, oh, we love this part of take 16 and we love this part of take 17, and so let's combine. So I think all told there's about like 18 cuts in there. And I mean, like we kind of nod to that. Like at one point, Seth ruins a take, and Sarah Polly gets really upset, and Seth says to her, well, why don't we just pick it up and we can stitch together, and she's like, no, we're not doing stitches. And he's like, but even 1917 would like, do stitches from like this
yeah.
part to that part, and the camera's panning back and forth. And each time the camera pans back and forth, we did a stitch. We didn't even have to at that moment, but we just thought it'd be funny to do that. So each time we're moving back and forth, we're actually cutting to a different take, just in that one scene. But yeah, so that was, it was designed to be different parts, but then we used the stitching to sort of combine our favorite performances and pace up certain moments and that kind of thing. And we also designed it, we each time we go into the TV to watch like them actually shoot a real take, that's all done in post, and so we were able to sort of control the timing and the
Mm.
pace of that. We were like, yeah, like it's funny. Yeah, I'm always amazed when visual effects work out really nicely. And so like, the camera pans to the TV and then we would cut, and then like someone would be like, oh wait, should we like hold on the TV for a while? Because we're gonna like, have to like, and then Sandra or VFX supervisor would be like, no, it's fine. And so like you're just like every time I watch that scene, I always like watch the edges and like all the movement of the camera, it's all just like created in post. It's like not real, they're just making it look like we were holding on that TV for a long time.
But the cool thing is that you can or I can or anybody else can say a lot about VFX or 18 stitches shots or whatever that is. But nevertheless, to have an entire episode in couple of different rooms and to have the dialogue and the script pretty much like it literally it's a appeasement between Seth Rogen's character and what was the director's name? She's
Sarah
Canadian, I
Polly.
forget. Sarah Polly, right? That's all it is. But to be able to carry that out with so many conflicts, with so many, it's a pure math. It's not that simple. It seems very simple, but it literally felt like again, I'm not trying to draw a compare like a Seinfeld episode. It was like literally
Yeah,
about no nothing.
yeah,
It was just him trying to connect with that's all it was about. But it was
yeah.
carried out for what, 30, 40 minutes? I don't even check the time how long the
It's
episode
not.
was.
It's not. It's literally that's about 30 minutes. Yeah.
30 minutes,
Um.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Pete Hayek, who wrote that episode. He comes from Veep, which is another show that kind of does those dynamics so well. That I think that script is also it's just genius. Like everything that happens is planted perfectly. Like every moment, like the fact that like Seth feels protective of Doug the PA because he used to be a PA, and like everything is planted perfectly. I love that script.
Awesome. And obviously you were on the set. I mean, seeing Martin Scorsese, and this is the second time, or I think he was in Shark Tale, which was a long time ago, the animated
Mm-hmm.
film.
Mm-hmm.
But just to see him in that kind of a performance, obviously he was playing who he is. He's
Mm-hmm.
gone through all that stuff about studio art versus
Mm-hmm.
money. What was
Yeah.
that experience like being there with him and being in front of the camera, at least for him?
I mean, it was crazy. I mean, he walked on set and everyone was so nervous. And, even Seth was like, I think Seth tells the story where, and he would talk about it on the day, but like the morning of the shoot, Seth's mom called him and was like, you're gonna direct Martin Scorsese today? Like, what if he doesn't like you? Like what if he thinks you're doing a bad job? Like, how are you gonna deal with that? And Seth was like, Mom, come on. Uh, so everyone was super nervous, and he just walked on set, and he's just, the funny thing about all these episodes, we have a number of directors in the episodes, everyone from Ron Howard to Martin Scorsese to Olivia Wilde to Sarah Polly. Every single director was so happy to be there. because they didn't have to direct. Like directing, is can be incredibly stressful.
It
And like
is.
literally they were just giddy, like Martin Scorsese walked on set and he was like skipping. He was so happy to be there. And he was doing like a bit, like he like walked in and his whole bit was that like he didn't understand filmmaking, like he didn't know what any of it was, and so like the DP would walk up to him and be like, "Hi, I'm Adam on the DP," and he'd be like, "Oh, what is that? What do you do? What's your job?" And like it was so weird and kind of like corny, but like everyone just loved it and ate it up, and it was just everyone was laughing, and it was great. And he's amazing. Like we were so nervous, we we had a we had a teleprompter in both of his scenes, with all his lines on it, that was actually in the scene, and we actually digitally painted it out.
Mm.
And because we were like, he's like a 80-year-old dude, like he's not gonna remember all these lines, and he like didn't need it. He was great. He was perfect. Yeah, it was a joy. It was a real highlight.
Amazing. I'll come back to the studio in a second. I just want to kind of revisit your beginnings of your career, how you were inspired, or what was the catalyst to be on a journey that has brought you to where you are today.
I mean, I always loved films as a kid. I just it was like, I was obsessed with movies, the 80s, and my family would go to the video store every weekend and pick out a couple movies to watch, and we would watch them. Um, and it honestly never really occurred to me that I could like work in movies. Like I just assumed that the people doing it were these incredible geniuses who were way smarter and more talented than I could ever be. Um, and you know, I, I had no context in the industry. I kind of like knew nobody. I was in New York, and I was like, maybe I should just like teach myself how to edit. Like I was good with computers, and at the time like Final Cut 1.0 had just come out, and like I got a copy
Yes,
somehow, and I
of
started messing
course.
around with it. Yeah. And I loved it, and it was like, again, like I couldn't imagine being part of the industry, but I knew I was good at putting touching the keyboard and doing the stuff, um and like anyone in this business, I just got really lucky. I met a guy who was sort of became my mentor, and he was an editor, and he edited a pilot for Comedy Central called Stella, which is this
Mm.
David Wayne show. And he asked me if I wanted to assist him, and I said yes. And then, like right after the pilot, he was like, "You know what? I'm going to become a therapist," and just like quit. And David Wayne
Wow.
was like, "Do you want to edit the show?" I was like, "Yes,
Wow.
yes, I do." And so like that was my first, editing job in television. And then like, right after the show wrapped, David says, I'm going to work on a TV show, on a movie called The 10. And it's actually great. It's like 10 short films that sort of like put together to be a movie. And so like, you've never done a movie before, but maybe you could do like one of them, and I was like a 20 something kid, and I was like, that sounds really cool, but I want to do all of them. And he was like, okay, come on, like you do three of them. And I was like, great, all of them. And he was like, fine, I'm gonna get two editors, you each do half. And I'm like, nope, all of them. And so it just like wore him down. And he finally just let me do all of them. And so that was my first movie. And then he got a bigger movie. He got this movie Role Models. It was like his first like Hollywood movie with Paul Rudd and Sean William Scott. And again, he was like, well, they're probably not going to hire you because you've never done a Hollywood movie, and I was like, you know, you make them hire me. And he eventually did. Yeah, and then like, it was like, there's so much luck involved, but yeah, Role Models came out, and Sacha Baron Cohen happened to watch it and was like, this movie's really good. He literally called me up and he was like, do you want to edit Bruno? And I was like, yes, I do. Um, and yeah, and then you're sort of off to the races.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. And people talk about luck, and I've spoken about luck on this podcast, which I agree with to a certain extent, but luck only comes if you work hard. I
Yeah.
mean, if you're not pushing, if you didn't push him to give you 10 films, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So I think the word luck sometimes is misinterpreted by a lot of people that, oh, you just got lucky. No, you got to
right.
work your way towards it, right? I know you're probably trying to be humble, but there's a lot of hard work and everything involved, which brings you luck.
There is, but I mean, like I completely agree with everything you're saying. But I also know editors who are just as hardworking
I get
as
it. That
me,
that I
and they just
yeah.
haven't had the breaks. So it's
Yeah.
like a combination.
Yeah, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. Um, Going back to the studio. So it's an exact representation, maybe sometimes a little bit over the top because it's comedy, of what Hollywood has become. The whole art versus money thing, the IP. I mean, Kool-Aid movie, like, I think that was like such a fine parody of what really Hollywood has
Mm-hmm.
become, and to be able to be part of that industry and make the hell out of fun out of it on the actual sets, were there a lot of laughs, like where people like kind of like, oh, are we pushing to the boundaries too much, or what was that environment like?
It was wonderful. I mean, um, yeah, I mean, it's a testament to Seth and Evan. Like, they've just been in this business for so long. They knew how I mean, they've been collecting these stories for years. Like, it's why it feels so authentic. It's like every one of these stories is something that either happened to them or happened to a friend of theirs or something like that. Um, but they also just, yeah, they created a great set. I mean, there was constant laughter. It's hard work. Like, sometimes you're
Yeah.
there at 3 in the morning doing a night shoot, and everyone is just miserable. But, like, there's also a ton of laughter. It never felt it, it there was never like a moment where it felt like we're doing something like wrong, or like there was this. It's funny, the first episode sort of climaxes with this scene where Charlie Theron is having a party, and Martin Scorsese, is crying, and the episode was written to end there.
Uh,
It was written to end at the end of that party, as they scurry off, and Martin Scorsese is crying. And it was like the one time we're making the show where we were like, that doesn't feel right. Like, this show is not about just like being a wrecking ball and making people cry. It's about these guys that they're trying. They're
yeah.
trying their best. They're screwing up left and right, but what it comes back to ultimately is love of movies. And so they're doing it because they love movies. They're not doing it to be to ruin people's lives. I think, which is actually something that Chase says in episode 3. Um, and so they added the scene where it's just like Seth and Ike are just watching Goodfellas together at the end, and it's like nothing really happens in that scene. It's sort of a funny way to end the episode, because like there's not like a huge laugh. It's sort of like there's not like any big plot thing that happens. It's just two guys who love movies watching a movie that they love. Um, but it just felt right. It felt like this is what the show is. This is the feeling of the show, and so, yeah, it was like the only time when we were like, oh gosh, something feels wrong, and then I was really happy with how they kind of fixed that or righted that ship.
Nice. That's nice. Nice of you to tell me that. I just thought, I don't know if this was intentional in the script or not, but when you have that scene where Scorsese and Charlize Theron are in the background and he's just kind of crying,
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was interesting because she is tall
Yeah.
and he is not your average height. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that juxtaposition in the background, even though it was
Yeah.
the depth of, I thought that was brilliant. I don't know, again, I don't know if it was in the script like that or it just spoke so much.
Yeah, I think it was in the script like that, and yeah, and Adam, who our DP, who is responsible for sort of like a lot of where the camera, almost all the where the camera ends up. I love the way he kind of built that, where the camera, where we sort of like follow the guys in profile to the bar, and the camera swings around. You see in the background. Yeah, there's a ton of because you can't like cut to a shot of them hugging, and like all those shots have to be so well designed where you're seeing all the
Yeah.
pieces that you need to see, and he just did an amazing job with that.
Yeah, it's all about a choreography, right? The entire,
Yeah,
I mean, every show and movie is, but this is just another level because the way you guys executed everything. Um,
it's
and
just one thing about that. It was just like,
please,
we
please,
Seth, Seth was often on set in the scene. Evan Goldberg and I were often sitting behind the camera, behind the monitors, and so we would just see what the camera was seeing. We wouldn't see what was going on set. Um, and there's a shot in episode 3, the Ron Howard scene, where it starts in Seth's
yeah.
office, and there's just like a little like chessboard in the foreground, and the camera kind of like moves up towards Seth. And we're like, oh, that's nice, Adam found a nice little way to start the scene. And then like at one point, like we like poke our head just like into the set, and we see there's like 5 guys like manipulating the camera around this chessboard. Like one guy kind of lifting it up, another guy clipping it onto a steady, with like, and it's just like, it was amazing. It was like just to see this simple little thing and all the work that goes into it. And every one of the scenes is like that. It's like, I think Apple's posted some like behind the scenes videos, but just like, like a camera that's on a steady cam that gets hooked to a crane to follow them up the stairs, and then gets hooked to another steady cam, and then gets passed to another, it's like the choreography is just amazing.
It's funny because I forgot the name. I was just before. Just give me 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
So this morning I was on social media. Yeah, it's called Soya Cuba.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm
Or
talking about,
Cuba.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
sure.
it's made in 1964, and
Mm-hmm.
how it begins. The shot is basically a funeral, and it
Mm-hmm.
begins with a woman, and the camera pulls back, and then it goes up like 4 or 5 levels, goes into a room where they're sort of finalizing a flag, and then it goes out another window and all the way over to a giant crowd. I mean, that's pretty much it's so funny because I saw that this morning and I was supposed to talk to you. I just saw so much connection there between
Mm-hmm.
that. It was a completely different tone, but the story and the energy was the same,
Well,
right?
it's funny because I mean, like anyone who loves film loves Oners. I think it's safe to say that. It's like
Yeah.
just this it's because it's rare, because it's like all the technical wizardry. And so like the fact that I think of it as one of the best compliments I've received, that a lot of people, even people who are in the film industry, don't realize that we're doing these long takes sometimes. Like eventually maybe they figure it out, but like people who watch the pilot were like, really? Those were all long takes. Um, and I feel like that's such a compliment, because it meant that we were able to keep focus on the dialogue and the camera and the story and the characters, while also doing these things. And so it's like, sometimes like there's this speech in episode 2 where Ike says, like Wonders are so stupid. They're just like the director jacking off in front, in front of the audience. Like, no one cares. And so like what was nice about the studio was being able to sort of create these scenes that people could sort of like, if they noticed what was going on, they could marvel at, and they could sort of say like, wow, how'd they pull that off? But if you didn't notice, you would just be completely engaged. That's always the worry about the Wonder, is that like, are you actually engaging people, or are you just showing off? And I think we hit that balance, and it was really hard, but just always something's always being said or done, or or someone's falling or hurting themselves. Like this, there's always something happening, which was always the goal.
And it's so true that you said that because for me, I remember when I watched the first, so I had seen the trailer, I saw the featurette, and I finally saw the series. I started watching the series. So it wasn't until the sequence where Brian Carston's character comes
Mm-hmm.
in, that's when it hit me. Is this like a long take
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
series? And
Yeah,
then when you mentioned earlier about the music track, I honestly don't remember any music track in the entire series.
that's
Like
great.
all the three, I have no clue if there was even music.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is a testament to everything that you guys are doing.
I mean, that was one of the hardest things in post was finding the right music. Because we needed something. We would try the scenes dry, and they'd be good. They're still good scenes, but like they would always be this kind of like, we wanted them to feel just more exciting and tense, and so we were like, well, what other movies have kind of tried, and the only like kind of movie that we could think of that had tried combining Oners with some kind of comedy was Birdman. And so we were like, what did Birdman do? And Birdman had this very like kind of like percussive like jazz drumming score. We started taking some like Birdman tracks and like putting them on the scene, and we were like, this works. This is great. Like this just, it doesn't draw too much attention to itself. It doesn't shade the emotion, but it just keeps like the energy and the tension up, um, and and so we were like, maybe we should hire the Birdman guy. And so we like called up Antonio Sanchez, who did the score for Birdman, and he's our composer, and he just surpassed himself on every level. Like we knew he was an amazing jazz drummer. That's what he's known for. But there's an episode 4 which just is airing now, is a noir episode. They kind of sort of get sucked into this noir mystery, and he like wrote like a full-on noir score with like beautiful
That's
melodies,
so cool.
and like he just delivered on every level. So yeah, I don't know if you've seen episode 4 yet, but if you do, hopefully you do notice the music. It's really great.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna wait until the 5th one comes out, then I'll watch them back to back. I like to watch them in 2s and
Great.
3s, just especially when it's a good show, a good series, so you don't
No, that
feel
makes sense.
like left hanging. So now the show is coming out, I think, on a weekly basis. How many
Mhm.
episodes are there? 10 or
And
9?
yeah,
10.
10.
So you got another 6 weeks, so probably by the end of May it will be done, more or less, I think,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
What is after that for you? Or what is after? Like, are you already done with that anyways? So are you working on anything exciting that you can talk about or?
Yeah, I'm doing. It's funny we just mentioned noir. I'm working on a live action Spider-Man noir TV show, starring Nicolas Cage, um, who I don't know if you've seen the Spider-Verse movies, but
Yeah, yeah,
but
I have.
he plays this character in the Spider-Verse movie called Spider-Noir. It's just his voice. But it's like another alternate dimension version of Spider-Man, who is from like he's like from a 1930s noir movie. And so yeah, we're doing this crazy 8 episode show. It's black and white. It's 1933 New York, and Nicolas Cage plays a kind of like sort of like over the hill version of Spider-Man, who's also a private detective, and it's weird and funny and pretty great.
Oh wow, that sounds exciting. I'm not a superhero Marvel type of like I don't really follow that much, but I have seen the first 2 Spider-Man films and
Mm-hmm.
the first 2 Spider-Verse.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds very interesting. And when is it
Yeah,
supposed to come out? Is it in
it doesn't
production?
come out till next year, but it's like early next year,
So
early
it's
2026.
already finished production or more or less
We
almost
finished
done.
production, and we've got a
Yeah.
ton of visual effects and editing to do. But yeah, no, I've never done any superhero stuff, mostly because it didn't interest me that much. But this was exciting, and it's different, and it's a very unusual superhero show. It's fun.
Awesome. And this is going to be for
For
Disney or
Amazon.
Amazon? Amazon. Amazing, man. Listen, I would love to talk to you about that whenever that comes out in January,
Great.
February, March. But before the Sis series ends, I would love to have you on maybe just before the last episode.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. And maybe if you're interested, we haven't done it. We're trying to do it live episodes. So if that's something you're up for, that'd be super cool. I'll leave that up to you.
Sounds good.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your work. It's phenomenal.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been great. It's really enjoyed talking to you.
Likewise, man. Take care.
Take care.